Camera and mic are on.
You better get happy about
The
that,
meeting
Sarah.
starts.
Okay,
Okay, we ready?
we are ready.
Okay, I'm calling the regular meeting of June 14th, 2023 to order at 6:04. And I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the town of Winnipeg Beach is located on First Nations Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene people in the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties made on these territories. We dedicate ourselves to move forward with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration to make Manitoba an inclusive and accessible place for everyone who lives here.
Be it resolved that the agenda for the June 14th, 2023 regular meeting of council be approved as per the following additions. Addition, water treatment plant truck fill upgrade. Addition, May finance report part 2. Addition, mower replacement request. Addition, public works / utility report May. Addition, Manitoba accessibility grant approval. Addition, rec t-shirt sponsorship minor hockey. Addition, seasonal hires.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Kozlowski. Discussion? Councillor Gendron?
Sharon said minor hockey, it's actually minor soccer.
Oh, minor hockey, sorry.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
okay.
It's printed as minor soccer. Minor
It is
soccer?
printed as such, and she said minor hockey. I don't want the hockey parents that may
Okay.
be watching getting all excited.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can we also add staff appreciation lunch
Staff appreciation lunch.
as an addition? Councillor Kozlowski?
What's the mower replacement request? Is there another grass cutter
It's equipment.
or brand new or fixed,
Well,
repaired? Is it in here?
Yeah, so
We're
the
just,
report, the report is right after the truck fill upgrade report, so there's all the data from there.
So we're just adding it to the agenda right now? It's gonna come up for discussion later on in the meeting?
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Be it hereby resolved that the minutes of the May 24th, 2023 regular meeting and June 7th, 2023 dangerous dog meeting be approved as circulated.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Can I get a seconder, please?
That's all I got.
Councillor Kozlowski. All in favor? Carried.
Be it hereby resolved that council approves the accounts payable listing being check number 21365 to 21462, inclusive of checks, electronic payments, and payroll issued in the amount of $368,661.74 as circulated.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Cool. I trust everybody's had a chance to look at the financials. Any questions, comments, points of discussion? Councillor Jarvis?
Yeah, we have another invoice for cats. I think it's over $800 now, but I thought we discussed with the animal control officer that we would get some sort of a breakdown as opposed to just get an invoice. Like, we have no beginning inventory, we know ending, you know what I mean? Like, we don't know how many cats, we don't know purchases as in food or any vet bills or anything like that. But I thought we'd had a conversation with him about that.
We did, and so he did provide a more detailed report that is listed under the committee reports.
I saw it, I didn't see that much about it.
Okay,
So when we get to the reports, we can, I'll discuss it then.
Okay.
I'm not saying, obviously, cut the check. just that I thought we had an agreement that we would get more information than you owe me $800 for 5 cats.
Yeah, so the standard indemnity though is by contract and there is no, negotiation on that.
Oh, no, I know that. He
Yeah.
said that in the past, he used to do more detailed reports, and he was told not to, and I was led to believe that he was gonna give us more detailed reports. And that was the original question a few months ago. Anyways,
Okay, so you'd like to talk about that when his report comes up
correct.
later on the agenda? Thank you.
Correct.
Any other comments about our financials? Yeah, it's 2 meetings in a row now.
It's my birthday tomorrow, I'm taking it easy.
It's brilliant. Okay, hearing no further comments, all in favor? Carried.
Be it resolved that council for the town of Winnipeg Beach hereby give first reading to General Enforcement Bylaw number 05-2023.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Kozlowski. I trust that everybody got a chance to read the enforcement bylaw. Sharon, did you want to say anything about it first?
So the enforcement bylaw is the first piece, so this is general enforcement. This general enforcement bylaw is applicable to any works that are being conducted that we are able to add to tax. So when we look at our other bylaws going forward, they will make reference to the enforcement bylaw. So I don't know, was there any questions to anyone in reference to that?
Good work.
No? Okay.
Okay. All in favor? Carried.
Be it resolved that council for the town of Winnipeg Beach hereby give first reading to vacant and derelict buildings bylaw number 06-2023.
Can I get a, thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Gendron. Discussion.
So, sorry.
I just want to clear on the, it seems pretty general on the vermin on the first page where it says, and whereas the existence of unsightly vacant buildings, it goes in, and a vermin infestation. Is this, how are they going to determine that? Are they going to use PCO or poolins or?
So I believe that when we look at with the vermin, that's under the schedules that have been provided. Storm doors.
But it mentions inspectors, etc. But you know, and coincidentally, they had the thing on the rat problem and what they do in Alberta. Why Alberta is the only place in the world that doesn't have rats. They have actual department, $300-something thousand designated to maintaining zero rats. Are we going to use some sort of a pest? If we have complaints that there are vermin, say on Strollway or whatever, are we going to use some poolins or somebody to go in and inspect the area that we're talking about or the buildings that we're talking about?
So when we look at this particular bylaw, so this is fairly new legislation that's come in with the Municipal Act, and that's why it's segregated from your regular unsightly and derelict buildings and all your other bylaws, as this is a whole new section that's come through. So although we've given first reading, the next steps in with this particular bylaws, we do have to hold a public hearing, as per accordance with the Municipal Act. And then we look at some of those internal pieces that come through with that. So this is just the first reading for us to then look at setting up that public hearing, decide what some of those processes look like if we want to attach those processes as additional schedules. There are some determinations that need to be made, such as the designated officer for this.
Yep.
What does that look like
Well, that's my
within
question.
that? Yeah, and so that's something that,
And I'm sorry, but I mentioned it because in the past we've had situations with skunks, situations with rats, etc., and we have used pest control to determine the existence of what we're talking about. And we've actually used people that trap these animals, be them the skunks. So it said designated officer, and I just.
and so our designated officer, like when it has designated officer, there is a designated officer bylaw that appoints who is the designated officer. And so right now, your current bylaw, back in 15, designates CAO, Public Works Manager, Fire Chief, Animal Control Officer, by Law Enforcement Officer. There was a listing of who was considered a designated officer. So if you do want to make sure that there is a clean process in reference to vermin infestation, and if you do look at wanting to say as council, having a contracted professional as part of this process, that still can be implemented. So this is the piece of how we move forward now is up for council discussion and go forward. So
that we can discuss this at the next time. Because in the past, there's still vermin downtown, and it's really noticeable in the winter because obviously there's tracks in the snow and then there's dens that they live in. And I know with Mayor Jackson, I pointed out a couple of spots, we've walked around a couple of times, and I pointed out a couple of spots where it's known that they exist. So when we get to that point that we deal with some of this, I just wanna make sure that we're using somebody that has the skill set to determine what we're doing. Because I don't, so.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, so that's fine. So that's where that discussion, cause so it's a bit, we can add that into either other schedule or just have that as part of our policy, very much like, with the notices, like here the notices are on there, but with our general enforcement bylaw, you'll notice that the letter of inspection, notice of the violation, those aren't included as schedules because there's somewhat more of an internal working document when it comes through that, whereas those pieces can change. We change our logo, we change a format, we don't have to change the existing bylaw. The process is saying this is what happens. So looking at that is certainly, we can say that is either, and I think for this particular bylaw, it makes the most sense to actually be very clear with what that process will look like so that there's no room for error as it is new legislation. So we can certainly add that. What I will do is add just pieces, not the bylaw itself, but for council discussion at the next meeting in reference to vermin infestation and the designated officer. So what that looks like, I mean, that we don't have to have all of that in place, like in reference to the application, section 39, where it makes reference to a derelict building certificate. That is something administration will need to create that format. So if there is that we would need to register against those properties.
Okay. There's a couple of comments I had. One was on page 3. Any boarded building is also deemed to be unsightly, which I really like. However, I had it written down here on page 4, number 12. It says, upon payment of any application or permit fee as designated in the town's annual fee schedule, the owner of a commercial building may obtain an unlimited number of boarded building permits for that building, each being valid for a period of 1 year. And I don't agree with that. I think that we need to have a fuller discussion around that, because that means we can have businesses on Main Street who decide to board up their buildings and just get a permit out for, $500 a year. Every year, and we could have a whole Main Street of boarded buildings and vacant buildings, which isn't okay. So I'd like to have a fuller discussion about that. because I noticed that a residential building owner will only be issued one boarded permit provided, and then they have to do something about their boarded up building, but business owners
I
don't
will
have
double
to.
check that with the Planning Act. There are other acts that come into play, and I believe that why businesses have more leniencies than residential properties is the demand. So unlike a residential home buy, sell, that you have more of an opportunity to, when we look at business properties, there could be numerous reasons as to why that business property may not sell, and it can't be a viable business. And so if you remove that from, and so I'll use a real easy example is a property that may have had a gas station on it, and you look at the contaminations in there. So although there's a building there, due to the increase in regulation, you may not just be able to open up any kind of business. You may not even be able to open up a gas station again due to the impacts to the soil and the environmental impacts. And therefore the building itself can't be, it makes it more challenging for that business to be operational, unlike a dwelling unit. And so I will double check that though with the Planning Act in that, but I believe that would be in there as a result of that type of circumstance.
But I understand that, I'll get you in a minute, Councilor Johnson. I understand that in terms of a gas station, for sure. But that also means that half our businesses could decide we're just not gonna do this anymore and board up the building and all wait for the next 10 or 15 years to see if they can make some big money to do something else, and half our Main Street is shut down by paying, a few $100s a year, and that's not okay either.
So options are, again, if there is other legislation though, that supersedes what your abilities are, you cannot change that. So a deterrent could be then is looking at that fee schedule and making that fee not just $500.
Okay.
Right? After like your first permit, second permit, third permit, have a fee schedule. As governance, you do have to govern in accordance with fair and reasonable.
For sure,
right?
absolutely.
So I mean, there may be, I will follow up with that because I'm not 100% certain there is other legislation that refers to business properties and being boarded. So first and foremost, verify if there is other legislation that supersedes our bylaw that we must adhere to. And second is, if there is, then we can be looking at what those fee schedules look like as more of a deterrent. But I do caution councils, you do have to recognize, in the case of a gas station, there may, we have to reasonably look at that, and if you have to create other legislations or parameters at that, because that is real and it's happened in several small communities that you certainly don't want to say you no longer get a boarded up permit, so then what does that leave that state of that property at?
Okay.
Demoed? Like that now you even lose the assessment. Some building is better than none.
Okay.
On taxation.
Councillor Jarvis?
I agree with Sharon on it because, and especially with commercial, I mean, even here in the beach, we've had Jane and Walters, we've had Ellie's Corners, we had the general store in Whitewall. So they've been for sale for 20 years. And then Jane and Walters, they've boarded it, but if there's no market, because there's too many factors that apply to commercial real estate, is that if, for example, the mill shuts down in, say, Eli, Manitoba, they no longer have the fiberboard plant, or Powerview. If a mill shut, what do you do if you own a business and then you try to make your business work for 2 or 3 years, and then your property value goes from say $100,000 down to $20,000 and there's no market? What do you do? And we have a classic example on Highway 9. We have about, I think Carlos, the restaurant at the trailer park, was inoperable for 12 years. They had to update their suppression system from 2012. You know what I mean? Because nobody had been in there in 10 years. Now, thank goodness he went in, but we used to have all these restaurants on Highway 9, and now they're no more. Even Ford's Groceries is gone. So you have to be really careful if we start to shut, we don't give them time to sell their building or at least do something with it, or repurpose their building.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to make mention of was 25 on page 16. The commercial building needs to be heated so the temperature does not fall below 10 degrees. And it also says residential buildings should be heated so the temperature does not fall below 10 degrees.
Are you on page 25?
Page 16,
Oh, page 16.
number 25, A and B.
Oh, so those would be the schedules, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
16, no, that's okay.
And I wonder what that does for cottages who might not be used for a couple of years, where it says residential vacant buildings shall be heated so that the temperature therein does not fall below 10 degrees. So I think we're gonna have further discussion on that, on both the commercial building and the residential building. How do we determine that? Who determines that? You know, what are the safety implications, and if we can enforce that? And if we can't enforce it, you know, we shouldn't have it in our bylaw. We should only have things that we can enforce. Councillor Jarvis.
I agree with Mayor Jackson. What do you do in the event of a power failure, and we've had them here with 2 and 3 days, and there's copious damage done to residential and commercial because the power has been out, the temperature's gonna fall, the pipes freeze, and there's copious damage, so.
So we just have to have further discussion on that when we do our next read. Any further discussion on this bylaw? Okay, let's do the first reading. All in favor? Carried.
So just for further clarification, public hearing, because it makes note that we actually have to give public notice, there is a process we need to follow that's in the Municipal Act as part of public notice versus just regular notice. So when we look at moving forward with this, before we give second reading, clearly we'll be addressing some of these items, but we also have to look at setting up a public hearing, and I do have to follow parameters where I have to within a 40-day period advertise at least 14 days before 7 days and 14 days within that 40-day period. So it's not just as simple as calling a public hearing, so I do request council to provide me some dates as to what does that public hearing date look like.
Okay. Councillor Gendron?
Public hearing can happen during a regular meeting of council?
It can.
I'd like to suggest we just hold it during a regular meeting of council.
And so then how quickly is council looking at moving at this bylaw? Because I do have to prepare notices, I do have to put them in the newspaper, and I will have to look at with this community, it's when we look at the local newspaper and recognize that we have such a diverse matrix with a lot of seasonals. Usually the local paper is because it's usually more permanent resident base, so I may have to as well do a mail out. So there is lots of, like, some steps in place, and so.
Do you have a timeline that you would recommend, given everything that you're gonna have to do to get the public hearing going?
No, it's just I have to have I have to have the dates, everything within that period to organize.
So then can I just suggest, Sharon, that you lay it out, and then whatever the next regular meeting of council is that fits in with you laying it all out will be when we'll have the public hearing?
Is council good with that? Okay, perfect.
Councillor Jarvis?
I was just gonna say the same thing, just put it in an email and that with all the
Okay.
criteria, and then we can decide on it.
Sorry,
Councillor
including
Gendron?
any, a deadline by which you want
Yeah.
any feedback on our thoughts on this?
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, so as you look through this, because I will be doing some additional follow-up with the items that were mentioned. If as you go through a second, third time reading, or after hearing some of the conversation, you go back and you say, you know, I'm not clear on this, please email me as soon as you have those thoughts, so that I could make sure that we have that follow-up.
And may I also request that if you are emailing Sharon with some questions or thoughts or suggested changes, that you actually include all of us in the email so that we can all weigh in and think about and hear each other's responses, concerns, and questions. It's a whole lot easier doing that as opposed to doing it in a vacuum, right?
Did we say all in favor? I can't recall now.
Okay, which one is in there? Maybe it's-
Okay. Be it resolved that council for the town of Winnipeg Beach give first reading to unsightly and derelict vehicles bylaw number 7-2023.
Trying to find it.
It's
Would you like my copy? Yeah, I just have my notes.
oh yeah.
Okay, well. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Seconder, please. Councillor Gendron. Computer discussion. Councillor Jarvis.
And it's on the unsightly property, it doesn't mention anything about graffiti in there. And I know we've issued those in the past because of graffiti on unsightly property. So it doesn't mention that, and then in rubbish, sorry, I'm going too fast, but on
No,
rubbish.
that's fine.
We don't have anything like furniture, fridges, appliances, things like that. So I don't know how specific you want it, because it mentions construction waste, etc., and household items, discarded household items. Like I know we have,
So do you want
I know in the
more
down,
specifics with that?
I think we should include appliances in that, because there are
Okay.
people that have appliances, and especially in the downtown core area, that are just sitting outside. And we also have furniture, just sitting outside, discarded furniture. And we seem to have a situation where people now, I know they had it at the Roadhouse and they had it at the Lodge, where people, when in the early hours of the morning or the late hours of the night, are discarding mattresses, etc., into the bulk list. And those are not acceptable at landfill because of the scotch-guard and the chemicals that are used on them. You have to actually pay a disposal fee for it, so they come in the night and they dump their stuff in or beside the trash, the bulk lift. And they've done it at the park as well.
So look at adding that under section K
Yeah,
in the
I-
definition.
I would assume, yeah.
And as well noted, hedges were also silent within that piece.
Yes.
So is this where the hedges would come in?
I think that this makes the most
It says
sense.
shrubs,
This
yeah.
comes, like, I mean, it says shrubs, but I think that like really clearly defining what that means, like when it comes with the hedges.
So we can then
Not just
address
the
the
shrubs.
hedges along the sidewalks that
Yeah.
prohibits,
And I did want to look at to see if your traffic bylaw made reference if there is another legislation that required with the hedges. So I did reach out to the bylaw officer on both of the items that had been brought forward with the graffiti and the hedges. And he had informed me that he was not part of either of those orders or those processes, that it was handled through the administration department, and that letters may have been sent by previous administration. So I'm still following up. It's not that I'm not following up on that. So that's the information I've received. So again, is a lack of communication with the bylaw officer and myself, that because there were two separate items. So is he saying to? And so I read the email as both items, they were not under his
jurisdiction.
not that they're not under his jurisdiction. He did not initiate the notice of violations or the orders. That was done through administration.
Councillor Jarvis.
I know that the letters were sent out in October, and this current administration came in July, and one of the previous council members in the previous administration received an unsightly notice in October, so.
Right, but was that notice,
How it was initiated
Right,
is
and
what
that's-
it is, yeah,
and
but
that's what I
somebody
have
must
to-
have initiated it.
that's what I have to follow up on. So I don't know if that was just, did administration,
Well, somebody would
take
have had to file a
ownership of
complaint
the-
and
of the
actually sign a
bylaw.
complaint.
Right.
That there should be a signature somewhere that said, go to this
Yes.
piece of property and issue this letter.
and so we are looking for the files, there, like again, prior to
They've
December,
disappeared.
there were no civic or separate roll files, there was some electronic files. So we are still looking to see if we can locate what that is. I did reach out to the bylaw officer to see if that was, and stated that it wasn't initiated through him. It was through the office, so I'm still trying to locate those files to see. And
So
if,
we are
and if
talking-
the process wasn't handled in accordance with the existing bylaw, I mean, I can send out a courtesy letter to go through or start new, where we're following the process. But I am still.
But we have to have a bylaw first that states it before we can start the process.
No, your existing legislation is in place, so with the existing legislation, we can still
Okay.
move on some properties. Some of the more complicated properties that is in town, that is in the state that it's in. It's preferable that the new legislation with the vacant and derelict buildings bylaw be passed prior to moving on that, because the municipal act did change from your other legislation and that's the bylaw that has a lot of teeth to it. So when we look at with the graffiti and things, those are a little bit separate and not as severe, so we can still use existing legislation that's in place to issue those orders.
But we don't know if we have existing legislation to deal with the shrubs.
And that I'm still reviewing as to where that falls into play. So the only other piece in reference to the unsightly and derelict vehicles is section 4 exemptions. There is a note from legal stating it is at council's discretion the number of derelict vehicles on a property. And so 2 is quite standard. However, this is your bylaw, so you certainly.
May I just ask a question of clarification?
Yep.
This might just be something I don't understand. Why would we want to allow people to keep up to 2 derelict vehicles on their property? Councilor Jarvis?
I just want to clarify one thing, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
number of derelict vehicles too, is that I've had vehicles that didn't have license plates on my property, but they were insured under fire and theft. They're perfectly operable. I just chose not to license them. And I've had people actually try and purchase some of my vehicles, and they weren't for sale, so I just say, sometimes people have 2 or 3 vehicles, and I just don't want to make the mistake that they're derelict, and they're not necessarily derelict.
Well, so then this is up for council
Because it mentions
discussion,
not having
because
license.
it does say, so at one point we were able, right, exactly, and so at one point, like, MPI changed, right, where you knew if it was registered or not, because you used to get issued those yearly stickers, and if you didn't have a sticker, then you knew that it wasn't registered. So MPI has changed that, which has caused some issue for municipalities when dealing with derelict vehicles, because we do not have the means to know at this point now whether or not there is registration on a vehicle. Because that sticker change, we just don't have access to that information.
Yeah.
But they might have a vehicle, like Councilor Jarvis, on their property that's not licensed or registered, but it's not derelict.
It's insured. Like I used to drive one vehicle in the winter, because the vehicle I drove in the summer was for stock and supplies, and that was a truck with a V8 in it, and it burned way more gas, but in the winter, I would drive the other vehicle.
That's what I'm saying, it's not a derelict vehicle.
It's not.
Well, as to here, does not have active license,
But
but
they
so,
could have
so
proof
the,
of
the
insurance.
issue is though, is this is what the definition is.
That's what I'm looking at.
So in the case of something like this, it's not as if it's all or nothing with these bylaws, there are processes that we have to follow. So the first notice, warning, or notice of violation that would be issued, in the case where there is insurance on there, the property owner comes forward, says, look, here's my proof that I've got insurance on this is not a derelict vehicle, case it then is closed, right?
But we have to
Counselor
add,
Gendron?
sorry, then we need to add that,
Okay.
because right now it's not an option under, means a vehicle that meets one or more of the following, doesn't have attached to an exposure of an active license plate, that it has a valid registration under the Drivers and Vehicles Act, or another form of private insurance.
Okay,
Counselor Kozlowski?
Can we not put a number of years that vehicle has been sitting there without, say, insurance or not using it? I'd say within 3 years or something, you know, if you got no insurance on it and haven't been using it, it's referred to as a derelict vehicle.
So you're saying that under exemptions, saying that notwithstanding section 2 and 3, a person may park or store 2 derelict vehicles on a property for a period of up to 2 years,
Yeah,
provided that.
3.
so what I would suggest is with that is there is that exemption piece, right? And so that's the piece like when we were referring to, and so why would someone have derelict vehicles on their property? So it may be a vehicle that they are looking at restoring. It may be a vehicle like,
Right.
you know, so you have to be cautious. I always caution council being too heavy-handed with things, and that's where you can look at, so the problem when you look at having number of years, and I've run into that problem because our bylaw with my previous municipality was set up like that, is all as it takes is that person to remove that vehicle, have it there for 2 years, remove it for a few weeks, and then bring it back, and now the 2 years
Put it on
starts.
another piece of property.
2 years starts all over again. So the timeline is tricky through there. So again, that's the point of why there's so many readings to a bylaw is looking at this first reading, taking a look at the legislation, think of some of the scenarios that you could, and you know, when you look at older vehicles that are needing to be restored, you know, whether you like it or not, council, there is also, you have to recognize that people may own vehicles, an engine may have blown, and they don't have the financial means to fix it.
For sure.
And so you have to be putting yourself in all sorts of scenarios when you're looking at your legislation and making sure that you're looking at it in a fair and reasonable manner. So when we look at those exemptions, instead of the 2-year placement and having a timeline to it, what would be circumstances where, so right here it says a person may park or store 2 derelict vehicles on the property, provided that the vehicle is wholly contained within a lawfully existing structure on the property, right? Or that it's tarped, right? That the vehicle is in the side yard or rear yard of a property and is covered by a tarp and is in good state of repair. So you have the ability, send me suggestions that you want to look at as to what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. If you want to have additional provisions with these exemptions, that, okay, that's fair, providing that your lot size is this, providing that it doesn't cause, it's taken up your parking area and that you now are parking on the road. Like this is a very unique community. So these are generally very templated, and you need to be really thinking about what works for you.
In our community. Councillor Gendron?
If we were giving consideration to it, is this also where, I mean, it's referring to vehicles, maybe I should look at the definition of vehicles, but does it also include derelict recreation vehicles? You know, derelict snowmobiles, derelict ATVs, speaking of the unique community we live in. And if not, then I'll put forward my thoughts on that.
It doesn't clearly state that, but it does include like pieces like motors, chassis, those types of things that have been removed, but it does not
not
make
refer to
reference to
snowmobiles,
ATVs.
quads, yeah, quads and, okay,
So maybe we need to do that.
or motorhomes.
While we're on that too, we might as well throw in like bombardiers and boats,
Boats.
cause there's a lot of weight on them.
So
Some of
does,
the boats.
do all
Okay,
those fall under
one
sorry.
person at a time,
Yeah,
please.
there's a lot of boats running around,
Okay.
so.
Would all those fall under recreation vehicles if we just specified recreation vehicles?
I will look at that,
Okay.
recreational vehicles.
Okay, any further discussion on the unsightly property and derelict vehicles first reading? Okay, all in favor? Carried?
Oops. Yeah, I just got a lead timed out here. Okay, so, the MBNA, the Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Act bylaw, or the Administrative Penalty Scheme bylaw, is not subject to first reading. This is for discussion, as there are a few pieces through there. This bylaw, we are not able to add to tax. So this is more fines and tickets.
And does this bylaw give us authority to get the fines and tickets?
And so I do have, like, we know this parking is top priority, and being able to enforce that, we know that that's a big piece of it. So there is a process that we have to follow. I am having a procedure and that process being created so that there's no misunderstanding by staff, council, enforcement, the public, as to what that process looks like. I have not been able to verify whether or not, when we go through this whole process, can this be part of MPI and the licensing? So they are, through legal right now, verifying yes or no as to what that looks like. We do have the ability, though, to apply through the Court of King's Bench for anything unpaid through there. So there it is. It's not simple. There is still process to be done. That's again where we look at who that screening officer is. I've included some of the FAQs with working with a fees bylaw for fines and tickets, and it's not recommended that it is the CAO, as the CAO has other authorities that I have to, and it can conflict to, or risk of conflict. So it's, what does that screening officer look like? It can be another employee. It cannot be council, but it can be another employee. And so then what does that look like? Additional duties, when we look at the overall workload of that, does that become a separate employee? I think initially at first it probably falls under a scope of work of existing, until it becomes a workload that's identified as causing issue with the other workload for that employee, that we then segregate that out. But I think it's too premature at this point through that. So again, we, like, going through that, we would have to apply through the courts to get those tickets.
So question, under Schedule A, can we change the amount of the penalty?
That is why this isn't up for first reading, because I fully expect this was a bit more of a copy and paste piece through there, as it does make reference to some bylaws that we don't have, like the accommodation tax bylaw that's listed through here, right? So that's the recommendation. So this seems to be quite common, but I think that a stiffer of a penalty, the better, if you're going through this process and you want to be heavy with the ticketing piece for parking,
Yep.
then I definitely encourage council to be looking at increased fees.
I would certainly support looking at increased fees, and especially the parking over 48 hours, I think needs to be quite steep. So a number of them. Councillor Jarvis.
I think I read it can only be a maximum of $1,000, you can only change up to $1,000, or was I wrong on that?
I believe so, like that's, yeah, through
The
that.
maximum penalty can only be 1,000.
Councillor Gendron.
While I agree that stronger penalties, might be helpful, I also think that stronger penalties and leaving the paid within 14 days at a nice low level of $25 might increase our chances of people coming in and willingly paying initially, rather than us having to then go through the courts and track everybody. So, while the fine is, well, the initial fine might be $100, you come in and pay it right within 14 days, and we get our $25, instead of the cost of going through the courts.
Councillor
I agree
Jarvis.
with Councillor General. I've had a couple of them, albeit parking at Hecla, and it's it's easier to, $25 than just pay the 50 or whatever.
So my only concern is if I wanna come down here for the weekend, and I don't wanna pay for parking and I can't find parking, can I park in front of Dairyby for 48 hours?
No, I
And then
understand,
come
I
and pay
understand.
$25 for my parking for the
Then
weekend?
maybe we should add a tow on it. You're there for, all vehicles will be towed at whatever time, 24 hours.
So the
Or repeat
parking,
offenders, like, you know, you see it in the movies, the guy opens a glove box and there's 50 tickets in there. Well, they have this, I forget, I'm gonna exaggerate, I think it was $9 million in outstanding traffic tickets in the city of Winnipeg. Find those people and, you know, find them and make them pay.
Okay, Councillor Gendron?
So while I said the 25, like 50%, keeping it at 50% of the
I see.
of the fine, sorry, I should have been clear on that. So if we end up moving the parking more than 48 hours or overnight parking, if we end up moving it to a $150 fine, then they get $75 if they come in. Sort of consistent with the percentages that are used here, but upping some of the initial fines.
so the big thing is to take a look at what you want to be able to ticket for.
Okay,
Because remember anything, so this bylaw is, there still will be a parking bylaw, which will give the parameters of what the parking is. This is just the fee schedule, like under the
Okay.
Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Act. You have to have a bylaw and you have to indicate the bylaws that will have this fee schedule to it. And those are usually ones that you cannot add to tax, and that's why we have that general enforcement bylaw,
Right.
which is separate, which does allow us to add to tax works that are being done, grass being cut, all of that's gonna fall under those bylaws, under the general enforcement bylaw, and not this municipal bylaw enforcement, like the Bylaw Enforcement Act, the administrative fees and penalties. So this is just about the fees and penalties, and we have to, by law, have this bylaw that outlines what fees and penalties are we gonna be charging fines to. So we have excessive noise, like, so we have, now, does council want that in there? Do they want that out of there? Like, what, and so again, that's why we're not even giving first reading to this. It was just more having this discussion of what this particular bylaw, the difference between this bylaw and the other bylaws are, because it's gonna be referencing those things.
And they are allowed to challenge this. There's an adjudication process.
There is.
So regardless of the penalty, regardless of the time frame, they have a 14 days to say, look, I want to contest this.
So they have the avenue of A first, going through the screening officer, which we're appointed for. And so if at that point the screening officer may say, you know what, that ticket's unjust, and they may throw that out. The screening officer may say, no, you know what, it's a legit charge. After the screening officer has made their decision, they do have another process where they can go through adjudication, which is appointed by the province. The adjudicators are appointed by the province, and so they still have that process to go through. If at that time, that through adjudication, that it's valid and warranted and process was followed, then it goes to, and it still goes unpaid. That's when we go through the Court of King's Bench, and we're reviewing whether or not, in the case of parking, can we have that audit? Is there a process in place? Has the government provided some provision where it then appears within their licensing system through MPI? And that piece I still haven't received that. So it is not as simple as putting up a meter, like when it comes to that. It could be like, you know, when we look at metered, I think metering is a little different than us issuing tickets, but I don't think so. I think it's still the same. You unless you do tollway enforced, and that's where you'll have those conversations of what does your parking bylaw look like.
Okay, Councillor Jarvis?
We'll also have to look at situations with no parking, handicap parking.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Accessible, because we have had situations where a few years ago, people were contesting tickets in no parking spots, but they were handicapped persons, and the handicap spots were taken by non-handicap permits. And so they would park as close as they could to where they go, because they're mobility challenged, so we have to look at that as well.
Yeah, there's lots of work to do with
Our whole
your
parking concept has to be reviewed.
Correct. So this bylaw is just if, regardless of what your parking looks like, if you're gonna ticket and have a charge to it, that's what this bylaw is, just about the fees and charges.
I'd also like to suggest under Schedule A that we look at the contravention animal control. I noticed that failure to have a dog on a leash, we've got first offense, second offense, and third and subsequent offenses. I'd like to see the same thing with the excessive barking and howling, because we have had some complaints where, you know, the dog is barking for 48 hours every weekend. And so I think we should do a step-up program for that too. First offense, second offense, and third offense. I was gonna say the same thing about the dog being at large uncontrolled, possibly. Councillor Jarvis.
If we're gonna talk about leash, then we should put some sort of a length of that leash. I was walking on the boardwalk last week, and the person had a dog on a rope. The rope was about 20 feet long, and the dog ended up jumping on an older woman, and the older woman got a little crazy, because she wasn't necessarily afraid of the dog, but the dog took her by surprise and jumped on her. And they had it on what you might think was a leash, but it was actually just about 20 feet of rope. So we need to make sure that leash is defined.
So that would never be defined in this bylaw. This
No,
is just
the
strictly
fees.
fees and tickets. So every bylaw that we're talking about, fees and tickets, and you wanna have legislation in there, same as within the animal control for first, second, third, notice, is that we may have to, revise our animal bylaw, so that it reflects that as well. I haven't reviewed that in depth again, cause this was just more for conversation for council to think
Some people think
of which bylaws you wanna have fees to, like what do you wanna charge tickets and fees for? And then we have to make sure that those bylaws will reflect the fee that you're looking at.
Councillor Gendron?
Yeah, that just sort of answered my thoughts. So if we don't have a bylaw that addresses the number of cats or dogs allowed in a home, then we're not gonna have a fine for it.
No.
Or if we're gonna have a fine for it, and it's not covered in another bylaw, then we need to also make sure that it's in the other bylaw.
Case in point, parking,
Okay.
our parking
Yeah.
bylaw,
Yeah.
right? So
Okay.
we're identifying what we're doing with this, and that's why this is only up for discussion, because we know that it goes hand in hand with other bylaws, is for council to really look at how they wanna look at their fines and administrative, like the tickets and the fine systems that we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we can go, and once that's determined, we're then able to then say, okay, here are the bylaws that are gonna need revision before this can come into effect.
And keeping in mind that it has to be enforceable. There's no point in us suggesting a fine for something that we don't have the ability to enforce, or the staff to enforce. We don't want the public thinking that things are finable, but we don't have anybody that can enforce that.
Right, no,
Yeah.
we're changing that.
Okay.
Yeah. Councillor Jarvis, did you have further
No,
comments?
the question was satisfied.
Thank you, I'm very glad to hear that you're satisfied.
So I will put this on unfinished business.
Yes, I'm gonna give this to you because there was just some other typos kinds of things
Okay.
you might wanna look at. Okay, I think I'm timed out here. NBA. Enforcement Act.
Okay, and speaking of unfinished, so just for discussion, Canada Post boxes. So I was not aware that this was an outstanding item. In talking with the existing one member of staff that's in the office today that would have been around through that, she does not believe anything formal has left the admin office. I think a phone call was made and that was it. So before I follow up with that, I'm needing some background as to what are we looking at.
I don't know who's first.
Councillor Jarvis, you were first, to be followed by Councillor General,
Um,
and myself.
About a month ago, because it was, we're getting boxes. I made a phone call about 6 weeks ago, I got kind of fed up with the thing, and so I phoned Canada Post. And contractor is out this week, they're putting 60 to 70 more boxes inside the post office. It'll be done supposedly by the end of the month. So we are getting, for anybody that's interested in getting a post office box, we are getting 60 to 70 new boxes.
So how many boxes do we have there already?
400 and something, oh, maybe more, 1,000.
There's 900, I believe.
Okay, so that's very interesting because,
I phoned customer complaint, Canada Post, and registered a complaint that we didn't have enough post office boxes, and then I had about 2 or 3 phone calls with, I assume, somebody in Ottawa, and next thing I know, they sent somebody down to talk to Bernice. Bernice had a conversation with them. Bob's your uncle, we're getting 70 post office boxes.
Councillor General.
Nope, nothing now, thank you. I just was going to say at the time it was discussed that, I believe it was discussed that administration would follow up with Canada Post, and I guess it doesn't need to be done now.
Councillor Kozlowski.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years anyways, probably longer. There's been over 100 people have been waiting for boxes. I was on there too for a year and a half. I know a few people still are on that, and I'd just like to thank Councillor Jarvis for going through with that and getting this done, and they'll be out this week to do it.
I thought it was an easy fix. I just made a phone call and I got some post office boxes.
so I do have a comment to make though. So when we look at post office box eligibility, it is designed for your primary dwelling.
You have to be a resident of Winnipeg Beach, you have to have
Correct.
I
just own property. And so the confusion I'm having is when we're looking at the waiting list that we have, we did just run a preliminary report so very much like the only data we have when we look at residential, like primary residence versus seasonal, right? Like a seasonal cottage owner technically is not eligible to
No.
have a post office box here.
No.
So we ran the report. If there's over 800 boxes and there's getting an additional 60 to 70, according to our education property tax report, which you can only have on residential properties, we recognize there's a business factor through here. It's just over 730 properties actually are eligible for education property tax.
So, while it must say somewhere that you have to live in Winnipeg Beach, I have friends who live in Matlock who have a post office here. I have friends who live in the RM of Gimli. They have a post office box here. I have friends who live in Sandy Hook. They have a post office box here. Residency was not always required in order to get a post office box here. And this was back in the day when there was probably more boxes than there were residents. And so if you came to apply, you live in the RM of Gimli, but you're a 2-minute drive from Winnipeg Beach and a 15-minute drive from Gimli, you just come in here and say, this is my address, and you got a post office box. And so that is what has happened. And that's happened over the years. And then what happened is we started getting more permanent residents in Winnipeg Beach, and by the time they were moving in the last 5, 8, 10 years, there was no boxes left. That's what happened. Councillor Gendron and then Councillor Jones.
And I do know of someone who went from being a permanent resident to a seasonal, and they lost their post office box. So, you know, I guess they are on top of at least that piece of it, is that
Yeah.
people going to seasonal from permanent are losing their mailbox.
Councillor Jarvis.
And I know people that that moved from the Hook, they live in Winnipeg Beach, but they still get their mail in the Hook, and I know people that live in Winnipeg Beach and moved to the Hook, and they still get their mail in Winnipeg Beach.
So it's a bit of a mismatch. I'm just surprised, Councillor Jarvis, when I was talking to people at the post office before I was ever on council, they said that they had been requesting additional boxes for the last number of years. And that the Canada Post
Honestly, I thought it was a simple fix.
So you just phoned as Joe
I went in there and I
Winnipeg Beach
asked,
and said,
I had to verify that what we've been told was true, and Bernice backed up kind of what Councillor Kozlowski said, that there has been for quite some time a 65-person waiting list for boxes. Verified what all of us have said, that people come and go and you gotta be brilliant. So Bernice gave me all of the criteria. I said, well, you know, it just seems because we have a lot of houses that are being, like cottages that are being renovated as permanent residents. Well, if they don't have a box, I said, if they're working Monday to Friday and they're commuting, and this was my conversation with All Soom Ottawa, I said, so I buy a derelict cottage, I build the house, I now work in Selkirk or Winnipeg, Monday to Friday, I can't get my mail. If I'm not at the post office general delivery by Saturday, I don't get mail. Anyways, and so I persisted, and long story short, we got mailboxes, so I just kept pushing the button still. I got the right answer. So.
Councillor Gendron.
Well, I'm just curious, was that an inquiry made just as a member of the public, or an inquiry made as a member of council?
Initially it was a member of the public, and then it became a council person. So, but initially it was just, I'm Joe Blow, I need to know, I want a mailbox, I want to get one. And that's how I got the customer complaint number, that's how I got everything else, and all the information that I wanted. Now, bear in mind, Bernice knows that I'm a councillor. For obvious reasons, she's the postmaster. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that probably, I might not have gotten that number, as Councillor Gendron has indicated, I might not have got that if Bernice hadn't known that I was a councillor. So,
Am I removing this from unfinished business?
I guess so, it's finished.
I would wait to see whether they.
I asked today, and Bernice said that the contractor's coming out this week to measure all the little measurements.
Councillor Gendron.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Sharon, I know you need something else to do, but could contact be made in writing with Canada Post? We've had members of the public inquire, that's what started this, letters coming in. Just wondering if there could be just a formal follow-up with them to ensure that, and maybe perhaps is this going to be eliminating their wait list, or are people still going to be on their wait list, just so we have a complete response from Canada Post in writing? Unless Councillor Jarvis, did they give you anything in writing, or was it all verbal?
No, I got they call it a ticket number for follow-up. So I could follow up on the ticket number, I've been communicating with Bernice because she seems to know what she's doing, and she assured me that there was 70 boxes coming in, we only have a 65-person waiting list, so I assume that that's gonna correct it. And twice she's told me June, will be done the end of the month. So I can only assume that what Bernice is telling me is true. So, no reason for Bernice to lie to me, so.
Oh, no. Councillor
And
Gendron.
that wasn't my point or my insinuation.
No.
I am sure that the postmaster is being very honest with Councillor Jarvis.
Okay, are we done with this issue? Thank you.
So unfinished business curling recognition event. So I did have conversation with our rec department. There was some miscommunication. They believed that they were going to be provided additional detail from council as to what the event looked like, what was going to happen through there. I, as the CAO, believed the rec department would just create the event. And so it became sort of stagnant, and through that miscommunication as to where the scope of responsibilities lie. I understand that previously there was a lot of specific direction given to departments, or they would not proceed, and I think that that's what the perceived message was given or believed, and I do not manage that way, that if there's a department head that's in charge of that department, I'm not micromanaging it. So I think that that's what's happened. So now we're looking at, with this unfinished business and the curling recognition event, and I think that, was it held at the rec center, was it held at the Legion, whose decision, what was happening? I think there was a lot of unanswered questions, and that's why it didn't follow through, because there was a bit of a circular motion with this particular event. Who was included, who wasn't included, what were we doing there? And I think that that's why that sort of fell through the cracks. So are we moving forward with this council, and what does that look like? So I could provide clear direction to our rec department.
Comment? Councillor Chandron?
Better late than never. I don't think it should go unrecognized. Perhaps, given the timing of things, we now maybe do it in conjunction with leading up to the start of the curling season, although I'm sure when you're curling at his level, curling season is 12 months a year, but perhaps something in conjunction with the start of curling at our curling club.
Councillor Kozlowski, you're the one that had brought this suggestion forward, and I thought it was a really good suggestion. Do you have an opinion on what we should be doing at this point?
Yeah, I sort of agree with Councillor General on that. Started the curling season. They're still functional and still going. Happens in the fall time.
And can you tell me when the curling season starts?
September, October maybe.
September, October. So you're suggesting beginning of September or the last part of August?
Well, we can find out for sure. You can call them and have somebody there. They might start a little later, right, depending on the people and the schedule and everything.
So to make it clear, you're saying that could be found out through a phone call. Are you suggesting that our rec director find out through a phone call and
Sure,
then make some recommendations as to when it should be happening in the fall before the curling season
Right.
starts? Councillor Gendron.
And that's fine if it's going through the rec director. I was just going to say I have a call into one of the current executives of the curling club for a couple of things, and I could certainly find out when the curling season starts, but you know what, probably best if Chris is gonna be the one organizing it, that she get all of the information, so that's fine.
So though, if you are meeting with the curling club, is this something that they would like to do somewhat of a joint venture with?
Well, part of my call was to try and organize a meeting. I know their executive is changing. Would really like to, as I left in my message, would really like to get some input from the departing executive. So I'm hoping that there will be some form of a conversation, and perhaps, and it wasn't just going to be a meeting with myself, I was trying to organize something, or get some interest. So perhaps it could be a meeting with administration or Carissa as well, just to get some input on, where things are standing right now with them, what they sort of see as future issues with the curling club that they may be looking at us for support with, when their season's gonna start, how are things looking for them, mustering up a new executive, are they concerned that there may not be a season next year, what can we do as a town to try and help support that, so that we don't see it falling through the cracks. So I will get back to yourself, Sharon, and Mayor Jackson and Councillor Hole as they're on recreation, as to the outcome of that discussion.
So I think first and foremost is checking availability of the honorees, and so if we could have a clear understanding of what the honorees, who they are, that would be great.
Councillor Kozlowski, could you give Sharon, our CAO, the information on who the honorees are?
I thought that was given last time.
I know, but
Okay,
can we do that
I'll
again?
double check that.
And, contact information?
If you have, otherwise we can
Yeah,
research
I
that.
can get that, we'll try.
Okay.
Yeah, we can research that as well.
Okay.
Okay, and so as discussed, what will happen moving forward is when we look at agenda items, to ensure that things do not get missed and have delay in progress, is we will list them as tabled, even if it's just an item that no decision need, just to make sure that we list it separately within the agenda. We may and then have it on tabled, and therefore our system, the AllNet system, will allow us to generate a tabled items report, and we can go through as to follow up that way, so that we make sure that things are dealt with in a timely manner.
Can I also mention then, I believe Councillor Kozlowski, you were already on council by then, but in the fall we were speaking about having butt stops. Councillor Jarvis, I think you had brought that up, throughout town, and also having more garbage cans and recycling cans that the previous acting CAO said that he was getting, and we actually had to make some decisions about whether we wanted the garbage and recycling side by side or separate, and the costs associated, and we made some decisions, and I don't know where that went.
Okay, so I will review previous YouTube council. I'll listen to the council agendas from days gone past. Any recollection, like as of July of 22, is that what we're doing to find our unfinished?
It wouldn't be any. Mayor Jackson was mayor at the table at the time, so it wouldn't have been previous to that.
I thought
But
it was sent through email.
But there might be emails
It
as
was
well,
done
and
through
I am of the understanding that there was a deadline to order them, and they were ordered.
That's what I'm saying. And so I don't know whether there's gonna be stuff that you're gonna have to pay for, but I'm not sure where they are, because I believe this was through email communication, and I think I've kept most of my emails, so I can forward you the emails from back then.
Going back
So
to-
Recycle Everywhere does offer that program where if you're looking at your recycle receptacles, if you're looking at having those adjacent ones where there's garbage and
Yes, we did.
recycle, the only cost associated to any municipality is to have just pay for the garbage piece. And so I haven't looked at the new fee schedule, but on average, the garbage piece, one of those cans would cost just under $700. So I do think I may have, as past practice in previous life, slated at least for 2 receptacles. I can double check because I did make cuts, so I can see if there is any in there. And if we did pay, we would have paid through Recycle Everywhere through, I can have accounts payable look to see if there were any invoices that were paid
Councillor
under that
Jarvis.
program.
I think there was also some discussion with involving the parks in on it.
Yep.
Because one of the things that I had spoken with Mayor Jackson about was that the entire park, you have 3 kilometers of no smoking, and they post no smoking signs, so if you're even at the bandstand, so to speak, or you have to come into town to have a cigarette. So they're either should share a cost for those butt stops, or fund them entirely. Because
Councillor Hall?
There was also about recycling bins, remember, for bandstands, because there's nothing out there. So that was part of it.
And I think that was all to be part of the conversation with the parks as well.
The recycling bins would be free of charge. Recycle Everywhere runs a really great program where if you can identify needs, and especially for events, that they do give you various types of containers for that. So
Yeah, because everybody fires all their cans right to the garbage.
That's right.
okay, so that is really easy fix for that. So we
And we
can
can place that in parks, like that wouldn't be a problem.
Well, it's something we can talk with Parks about when we have that meeting next week.
We have to identify the locations, and as far as if parks are fine with that, and if there needs to be, again, we look at maybe a shared service agreement where they allow us to put that there, however, the responsibility of removal of those and cleaning up becomes owners of the town, like it could be something as simple as that.
We
Councillor
had that
Jarvis.
years ago, I don't know, I'll say 10 or 12 years ago, where we actually, because we maintained garbage cans, in those days, we used to have a lot of snowmobiles. There were more restaurants open during the winter and so on and so forth. And on the east side of Main Street, they had a number, maybe I'll say 6 or 8 receptacles, and we looked after changing those.
Okay, Councillor Gendron.
August the 15th, 2022, there was communication from Finance at Winnipeg Beach, and Mayor Jackson's response are for these two right now, Sharon, and you can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It was to do with the discontinued Barkman concrete bins was the subject, so I'll just forward these to you. Does anyone else want them as a refresh?
No, I see them here.
Okay.
I probably have it.
Sure. We're not going to go
I'll
through
forward it to both of you.
175 emails.
Well, I'll reply to you, Sharon, Mayor Jackson, and add the CAO as a
Perfect.
CC.
Thank you.
you.
So if there is anything, like I said, I will, as I'm through the workday, I'll put earbuds in and listen to meetings in the background while I'm doing other things, just so if something comes out of it for past items.
Oh my God, that sounds boring.
Just so that we make sure that we've covered
Okay.
we've covered everything
Good for you. Thank
over within this period. Okay, new and general business. Be it hereby resolved that council authorize the purchase of a 2014 McLean Engineering articulating sidewalk tractor with mower package, plus the following attachments: 60-inch folding, I've got a typo there, 60, yeah, that's a big one, a 60-inch folding V-plow, 60-inch power angling sweeper with tilt cylinder, 14-foot finishing mower, 14-inch finishing mower, and 50-inch snow blower with sidewalk chute at a cost of $148,843.84 plus applicable taxes. And further be it resolved, the Kubota SVL 65 trade-in value of $70,000 plus applicable taxes. And be it further resolved that council agree to a payment term of 48 months with a monthly cost of $1,998.90.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Gendron. Discussion. Councillor Kozlowski.
Was this put into the budget for this year?
It was part of the discussions, and that's where the 48-month term was decided.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Call the question. All in favor? Carried.
We are. Be it hereby resolved that council authorize the expenditure to repair the broken glass at 315 River Avenue caused by Public Works Department while mowing the grass along the alley.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Kozlowski. Discussion. I trust everybody had the opportunity of reading the attached information. Any discussion? All in. Councillor Gendron.
So it has been confirmed that we were mowing there, and, okay.
Public Works did confirm
Did
that
confirm
was
that-
fine
that-
within the time frame.
Okay, thank you.
They notified the worker at the time? Was it sometime later, a day later, 2 days later?
I don't believe that the worker was notified. We became aware of the situation by the letter that was provided.
Further-
How big is this window? It's the regular glass when we first green.
It's like $40.
Councillor Jarvis?
They've, they've done this before, even at the bank, pick up a stone with a.
It can happen to anybody.
And it comes off there like a rocket, so,
Oh, yeah.
and it'll go 40 feet, no problem.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Be it hereby resolved that council authorize a donation to the Interlake Eastern Seniors Resource Coordinators Conference at a cost not to exceed blank.
Can I get a mover, please? Mr. Jarvis? Get a seconder, please? Kozlowski? Discussion.
So with looking at some of the town material that we have, we are running low. One of the needs that we do have for these types of circumstances are pens and notepads. So they're fairly reasonably cost when we look at that. I expect that there's 90 participants. If we look at a notepad and pen, we're looking at nothing more than $300 to support and for all of these various coordinators. So I think it's a.
So is your suggestion that we say not to exceed $300?
That would be the minimum amount, correct? That I would suggest. I don't think you can really give much more away for 90 items more, than 300 a piece. Or $3 a piece.
Does it have to have a dollar value
No,
attached?
it doesn't.
Can we just instead indicate
It doesn't.
number of items?
Yeah, it was just more to have that council
Yeah.
discussion that where we can still provide something reasonable for 90 people. Yeah.
For sure. So can we just say authorize the donation to the Interlake Eastern Seniors Resource Center Coordinators Conference? Period.
We can do that.
Oh, that would be good. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried.
So Arm of Gimli invitation, short-term rental meeting. I have provided regrets of council of non-attendance. Item 9.5, driving range concerns. No resolution required. This is still part of the subdivision application. I have received correspondence from the applicant that they are looking at revising their application. I have not received the revision to date. So just for council to recognize that going through that subdivision application process, these letters will be put in that file for council consideration.
Okay. Any discussion? Councilor Jenna?
Yeah, sorry, so they'll just be put in the file because we receive them now, or are they things that have to be received after the notice of the public hearing, in which case these individuals need to be advised that that's when they should be addressing it, or can we carry it forward for them?
So we would just be carrying it forward. So when we look at any subdivision application, right, a conditional approval is the first step, and that's where council would say, council approves the subdivision based on the following conditions. It's very standard, some of them very standard development agreements. So if there's anything that's of concern based off of this correspondence that council's received that they would like to make sure is part of a development agreement or a condition within that application, it's more as a reference point, because you do have that as one thing with councils, and I know there is changing to the Planning Act and legislation and process through there though, but you do have the right to enter into that development agreement and put conditions as you see fit. And so I think it's just, when I say the file, it's as reference point so that it's not forgotten, as we may not receive the revision for months, right?
Any further discussion? Okay.
9.6 AMM insurance required risks improvements. I have reached out to all our department heads in reference to this document. There are several of these items that have been addressed already, and I'm just waiting for a formal from each department. Fire department has provided detailed what items have been addressed, what items have not been addressed. Some of these items, my retort to the insurance company will be budget's already set. These weren't identified in the budget, and they will be revisited in 2024 budget for any of the items that are very costly or may have the potential to be costly, but a lot of the fixes, the recommendations have been addressed.
Discussion on that? See, we had a number of RCMP reports. Did everybody get a chance to read the mayor's report, the quarter, and the annual report? And do you have any questions or comments about that?
Be it hereby resolved that council do not authorize the request to paint the sidewalk in front of the business location as requested.
Can I get a mover, please? Mr. Gendron. A seconder, please. I believe that means it's taken.
No, you can second it.
No. Not gonna bother. Table.
Maple Street Pier. So although CAO report to follow, I did include a map. I'm still waiting for some additional information from Planning District. So we did receive several emails in reference to that. There were lots of stories and ideas as to what's transpired. We still haven't gotten to the entirety of it all. We do know that the area that the pier stairway is located is town-owned property. So when we look at that, through the town-owned property area with the map that was provided is this pink section. All of that is considered roadway, road allowance. And so when we look at this, and this is gonna be subject to council conversation, planning, and decisions as to what you want to do with that. Prior to doing anything, we have boarded up that access because this is a road allowance. No structures are permitted on a road allowance. And so, not saying forever, but what we do have to do without a doubt is create a road closing bylaw, which will close this section of the road allowance. And so when we look at that, I do recommend with council looking at that pink line. There is quite a big section that we may want to include, not just that one piece of the pier, in case there is additional further development that or structure or anything that you may want to be looking at putting within that pink section. So having this sort of planning discussion is definitely needed. We cannot just go put new stairs in. I do caution council, once you're made aware of a situation, following legislation and regulation is highly recommended as council, as you do set your own regulation and legislation that you expect others to follow. The expectation is that council follows other legislation and regulation as well, and structures are not permitted on road allowances. So again, it is up to council decision and directive.
Councilor Gendron?
As Mayor Jackson alluded to on another subject, when we are addressing things that are sent to everybody, a reply to all would be appreciated. I got a bit of a dressing down from one of the people in the media, because what I sent, somebody else responded to her in a completely different manner, Had I known that the other person had made that response, I would not have deferred it to the CAO. If I had also received the email as a courtesy to state that they asked for it, we're going to ask for it to be put on the agenda.
Further discussion? So what's council's thought about Maple Pier, please? I need to hear some feedback from council.
I visited it with you,
Yeah, we did.
and I spoke with Councillor Gendron about it, and I'm led to believe that if we don't, we own it, but it's considered roadway, then we shouldn't just board it up, or I don't recommend that we build a pier there.
And you don't have any recollection of when or how or by whom that pier was built, eh?
No, you know what, I had this conversation with Councillor Gendron, that I ran into a person that been around the beach for a long time, and knew a lot of the players down there, and was led to believe that it was always private property, and now I find out it's different, and I think Councillor Gendron alluded to the same way, it was never. So I guess when I say I'm in the dark, and I don't think that we have any responsibility about it.
I used to, in full disclosure, I used to have a cottage down there. I was two doors down, right? I told you about that. And there's had always been a debate about whether cottage owners owned to the edge of the water or didn't own to the edge of the water. It sounds like we finally have confirmation that in fact it's town property to the edge of the water. So there's always been some controversy about who got to have access to Maple Beach. I do know that when I owned down there, there was never a pier out there, but then the rocks were never there. Those rocks were brought in after that flood that came up, and I believe it was the homeowners that went to the expense of bringing those rocks in. And I believe it was after that homeowners might have come together to build the pier, probably not realizing they were building it on town property. But this is sort of a guess on my part in terms of trying to put some pieces together. Councillor Jarvis?
And again, I've had 2 or 3 conversations since you and I had gone to see the property, and again, I've heard from another person verifying what you said, is that those rocks were never put there from the town. How they got there was all personal property. So, but after that, I don't know, I agree with whatever the CAO has said.
Absolutely.
Back that up 100%.
Councillor Jenner?
Well, I'm certainly not in support of it. There is a pier 2 blocks away. I would like to hear from the councillor that did advise the resident that they were in support of it, and hear what their opinion is and why they are in support of it.
Okay, so who was that? Was it a current council member?
It was a councillor that replied to one of the individuals that sent the email in.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I do recommend that we remove the private property sign now that it has been determined that it is town property. I think that's first and foremost, and then the decision as to the structure itself, that will be a decision of council. Like I said, I know at this point the Public Works Manager did board up the entrance. I have not gone there we will not be policing that on a regular basis to make sure that the boards are up in place, but at some point removal of restructure more permanent, like what does council want us to be looking at doing there? Are we looking at closing that road, like, you know, no point in going to an expense to remove something if we are going to move forward at closing that section of the road and permit some level of structure, but I would have to add that with our insurance policies as well, and look at that process. So as a result of this, we don't know what we don't know, and now that we do know, I will be following up in reference to Poplar, 5th and I believe 7th Piers, if those are also on road allowances, and a road closure has not occurred, then I'm gonna strongly recommend that we do that as well, and just as formalities, just because now that we're aware of the situation, don't leave the mess for someone else to clean up. We know that you want those piers there, they've been identified, they're in the budget, close the road and leave it through there. But as far as Maple, we will need some additional direction as to what that looks like with council.
Councillor
How
Kozlowski,
close is the nearest pier to there?
2 blocks.
2 blocks?
2 blocks.
Yeah, I'd say close the road then.
No, but close the road, like we need to close the road so you can have a structure there. Because right now, it's an open road allowance, and
What kind of structure?
The pier.
there's a mini pier, it's not like the big piers, there's a mini pier and then some stairs,
There's a landing.
a landing.
And there's stairs going up
To
and
the-
down?
Was going down.
There's nothing there now.
The stairs are missing, and that's what's happened. I think it was due to the high water levels last year that they've been ripped aside. And because the stairs are no longer in place, that's what's caused the concern for the residents. So I can say that in the past years, Public Works, any of the existing Public Works staff that's been around, they have never addressed Maple, at all, it's never been on the radar. So the demand is, town, put your stairs back, and we're saying, whoa, that's what's opened this for us to determine what's happening. And so we know that the properties, the towns, we know that it's currently an open road allowance. We know that if we wanna continue to have a structure there, we have to close the road in order to allow that structure.
Councillor.
So when we closed the road, did we put a barrier prohibiting access to it?
We have not, when I say close the road, it's in reference to, so every road has to be registered. It's a registered road, you have your registered road allowance, right? And so right now, that road and that area is registered as a road allowance, right? So you can't build structures on road allowances, right? When you look at the planning, right? So so when I'm saying close the road, there are barricades there, but I'm saying legislatively wise, we need to pass a road closure bylaw, very similar like what's happened where there was a piece of property further north that a road closure bylaw was.
And there used to be a pier there, just so you know, so in all likelihood, so when you're saying road closure, it's like we're no longer declaring that piece of property as a road.
Road allowance.
So it doesn't mean we have to physically close
Close
the
the
road.
road.
But yes, so there did used to be a pier at 10th as well, Sharon, so in all likelihood, if 10th wasn't closed where there used to be a pier, chances are pretty good that it also wasn't done at 7th, 5th, or Poplar.
Yeah.
Councillor Jarvis.
So we are taking the landing apart, right?
I haven't been that's what I'm asking direction
Because,
for.
and I know that when Mayor Jackson and I were there's a drop off, and you're gonna, but knowing what I know, is that kids are gonna, that's why I said, is there access to it? If we haven't, the kids are gonna party there. And heaven forbid, that's a drop off, that's a danger, so we either do something with, my concern is a safety issue. We
As mine as well.
prohibit access entirely, or we disassemble it.
Councillor Hill.
I thought it was there for access to the beach.
It is, that's the original
Originally.
thing, but somebody put rocks there, and then they had to build a pier to get over it.
There was access to the
Yeah.
beach
Yeah.
until the homeowners in that area decided to put rocks in. Even though it wasn't their land to put the rocks
And I
on.
think we
But
removed the
once,
stairs.
once they put the
No.
rocks in, they put a pier in and they did the stairs. Winnipeg Beach has never built anything there because the landowners around there continued to insist that it was their property to do that. Our CAO did her research and found out that it's not private property, it's town property on which they put rocks and then they put a pier.
There has been in reference to the stairs, that was the understanding, people thought that we removed the stairs. Our works crew did not remove the stairs. The assumption is, and some of the concerned residents within the area actually contacted another contractor to come look at that location, and that contractor also confirmed they believe that those stairs were through the wash of the high water levels as they were, and how they were built and how they were secured. That's what happened to the stairs, that they did get washed away and not removed by town.
Councillor Gendron and then Councillor Jarvis.
I believe there is beach access if they walk to the end of that short block towards the marina. There is still beach access available to the public, but in a safe manner.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, two things now, because I gotta back up what Councillor Chandra, there is access down there,
Yes,
and there's
there
a
is.
parking lot. Now, is that the marina's land, or who owns
No.
that land? And then I forgot the second thing I was gonna say.
So
Oh my God, and it was good too.
It'll come back to you, I'll just show you on the map here.
Yeah.
Sharon, in case you're not familiar. So here's Maple here, and then,
Federal land.
this is federal land, and there's a gravel area here where you can park and go and fish, there's rocks there, but you can also go onto the sand, there's a nice stretch of sandy beach up through here, and so you can access Maple Beach that way.
So although this map provided to council doesn't go that far, looking at that mappage and the color scheme, where you see the white is where is that outline within pink. So that's gonna say to me that that is what council has as registered road allowances, all that white along the front. And that can go all the way, although in the map through planning doesn't go up that high. I do encourage council to take a look at that when you're looking at development and other points of interest or whatever you'd like to do through there. It is your property. If you close that road allowance, you can be looking at, if you want to remove some of those rocks to re-provide beach access, you very well, that may be of importance to council. So there's a lot of moving parts with this piece. As much as it seems as simple, just put the stairs back, it's not as simple. And so I do, before we make a decision is of get rid of all of it, I think that secure safety is of utmost importance, right? 100% I agree with that. And so that's where I'm looking from direction. If council wants the structure in its entirety removed, or are we just trying to secure to really close up any access to that platform?
I don't know if we have it in the budget, and I don't know what the costs would be. But I agree with Councillor Jarvis that that pier, the way it's sitting right now, is an accident waiting to happen. I don't know how one would close it off where young people or young adults aren't going to get access to it, because anybody can climb over any kind of barricade you put up or any of the sides in a New York minute. And all of us were teenagers and young adults once, and we know what it's like to try and find party places in the summer. And it would be horrible if somebody lost their life because we didn't do something about a safety issue that we are very aware of. I would like to see, if we have the money in the budget, and I have no idea how much this would cost, that we take the pier down. Councillor Jarvis and I, when we were looking at it, it looks like we're going to have to remove some of the rocks to get that pier down. But I'm wondering if we can take the pier down and also take out the rocks wide enough for a pathway down to Maple Beach, so that the residents who are concerned there about not having access to Maple Beach and all of those kinds of things, and the town never put the rocks there in the first place, that we remove the pier and we remove the rocks, or sufficient rocks to allow access. And I don't know what we would do with those rocks. I do not believe we should throw them away, because I'm sure Odette would come up with some really wonderful things to do with these beautiful rocks. But I think that we need to address it. I don't think that just putting a piece of plywood over the front is going to stop people from partying. So at the very least, the pier has to come down. That's my opinion. Councillor Gendron.
I like your suggestions, and I think it is, from both perspectives, you know, from a safety perspective, we are doing what we can, taking into consideration that people are familiar with being able to have beach access, and while it is not going to the cost of replacing the stairs and taking on the responsibility of maintaining that and putting it on our insurance plan. It is also providing, recognizing that people in the area are used to having beach access. So we will, you know, do something sort of a balance between the two sides, and I would certainly be in favor of supporting that and finding the money somewhere so that it can be done. At least the safety portion immediately. Yeah.
Councillor Jarvis.
I agree with both of you, taking it down, and I think the wood is salvageable. That's treated wood. Yeah, like, there's no way that we should saw that in half. Like, that wood can be disassembled and used for other purposes.
Well, and it could be, we could use it for piers that are still being constructed on
That is very
Fifth and
expensive
Seventh.
wood, and back to the other thing about the rocks that are there, move them on top of the other rocks, just equally. You know, like take 10 rocks here, put it there, 10 rocks, build up the other part just to give them the access.
So then if we have high lake water, again, where we're concerned about flooding, we can also get our machinery down there and pull the rocks back in.
If we have to, plus they're not our rocks. If they were bought by somebody else, I don't mean,
I have no idea.
so,
Good thinking, Councillor Jarvis, thank you.
thank you.
That makes sense. By the by, I went and saw Poplar Pier and it's just beautiful, just beautiful.
Yeah, I agree, comments is.
And so if they want to use some of that wood for some of the other piers, that makes piles of sense. Any further
Yeah, we just
discussion?
spent like $19,000 on wood,
I know.
so.
Is there not a roadway up there that the fishermen go fishing and skidooing up in that very area?
Not off Maple.
No, this is a commercial,
Oh, no, south
this is a
of the-
commercial dock right here, hang on.
South of Maple, south of that,
Where's the dock,
Yep.
Boundary Creek?
south of the dock,
South of the dock?
yeah.
No,
Marina, because I was asking the CAO last year, some of the residents were asking us to plow the roads out there.
no, this is all commercial dock here.
Mhm.
For all
Yeah,
commercial
we-
fishermen, and they park part of this federal land, but you don't have to worry about them on freeze up, cause their boats are out of the water, so we don't have to worry about plowing
Yeah,
them.
well, it's east of that anyways. It's east and it goes right onto the lake. So I
Yeah.
went up there with one of the.
Yeah, but we do that, that comes out of here off Prospect. It goes into the main parking lot and then they go right to the water.
No, this is further, this is past the marina and then coming back south a little bit.
No,
I think around that beach area, I think there's a road up there that they use in the wintertime to go fishing and snowmobiling, and there's a snowmobile trail
Off
up there
Prospect.
also. Not off Prospect.
Okay, but we can figure out
Yeah.
winter activities on the lake at some other time. Any further discussion on this?
So just to note, if, there is no safety reserve of any sort, but there is an economic development reserve, and so if we look at this kind of initiative, the piers are listed under economic development. If I am not able to find, first and foremost, I will touch base with Public Works to see what works can be done internally, and what cannot be done internally. So if we can remove the structures internally, then there's not an additional cost, and therefore then looking at the budget's not required. I have some reservations with some of the size of the rock that is there and whether or not we have the equipment to actually move them safely. So that may be needed to be contracted out. So looking at what some of those costs that can be done in steps, first and foremost, look at the structure. Second, looking at the rocks to provide access. I think that's some pretty big equipment that you're gonna need, and what those costs look like. And if we, again, if we don't have, I can't find allocation in the budget, there is an economic development reserve that we could utilize.
Councillor Jarvis?
and I know this is skipping ahead, but what's the function of the operational grant, the municipal operational grant? Like, we just got our second payment and that's a big chunk of cash.
So the operational grants just listed within the budget as revenue we've received, so it's already accounted for that we expect that revenue.
I just thought like we had passed go and collected $200.
Yeah, no, it's not that it wasn't allocated revenue in the budget, so yeah,
Okay.
it's already been accounted.
Councillor
How
Kozlowski?
many feet of rock do we have?
I
Over there,
8
feet? Yeah. And they're big rocks.
yeah.
That's not hard.
Again, depending, is there an easier course of path, like,
They can bring that skills.
while we were there, looking at opening and removing rocks was not in the forefront of the inspection. It was looking at that structure and looking at how things were set up. So I will be following up with Public Works to, again, look to see what they are able to do and what they are not able to do, and then look at getting some pricing.
Yeah, I trust that Public Works will be able to determine pretty quickly whether they'll be able to do it or not. They're pretty good guys, they know their stuff. Okay, on to the next.
Whereas well number 3 being the project to drill a new well and provide communication between all 3 well pumps to mitigate risk of low pressure in the water lines causing a boiled water advisory is not completed. And whereas there's no firm commitment date from the contractor to fill this obligation, and whereas the risk of boiled water advisory due to bulk truck fills is extremely high, therefore be it resolved that council approve the separation of the truck fill station from the water treatment plant at a cost not to exceed $7,671, and further be it resolved that council authorize the project expenditures be borne by the utility reserve.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Coe. Discussion. You'll see that I believe that we have some information about that that was provided to us today in terms of the background, the financial implications and recommendations. I'm trusting everybody had an opportunity to apprise themselves of the situation. Councillor General.
And this situation in and of itself certainly supports our need to be building up our reserves. Things like this happen, and if we don't have money in the reserves, we can't tap them. So we're fortunate that that was one reserve that still had money in it.
Councillor Jarvis.
But we are supporting doing this, right? Like to separate them?
That's the question before us right now.
This has been a pet project of mine since
Of course.
forever. No, because in the summer, downtown goes out of water sometimes, and heaven forbid that you're filling fire trucks with potable water. You know what I mean? So we need to separate that issue. Because we've been through tons of these. You know, and that's the worst thing. You get a grass fire or whatever, and they're using water like crazy. So I concur. I support it. If that's what Councillor Gendron was saying, to do this, and I support it as well.
I support this as well. I'm just thinking out loud here. You know the water tank that we have there?
Is it fillable?
No, no, the guys say no.
You know, I looked into this about 8 years ago, and there's municipalities along the Great Lakes in the United States, and you can get a special filter from the lake for fire trucks. It's a special, I don't know how costly it is, but I looked into it because it would become so regular, such a regular occurrence that in the summer, you know, in the Canada day, hot. People are everywhere. People are consuming water, and invariably you run out of water. So there are special filters and pumps that you can use to pump lake water into a fire truck.
We do,
Yeah, you know about that?
we have filled from the lake.
Yeah. But you can do it, but you'll ruin your equipment unless you have special filters in there.
Well,
That's what I've led to believe.
Okay, one person at a time, please, Councillor. So you're in agreement with this, Councillor Jarvis?
Yeah.
Yep. Other questions, comments, points of discussion? Okay, all in favor? Carried.
Mower replacement, whereas the Public Works Manager has made a request to purchase 2 new riding mowers and 1 push mower to optimize efficiency and grass cutting for the town. And whereas the trade-in value for the Kubota GF 1800 has been quoted for $4,000 and can be used to offset the purchase of said equipment. Therefore be it resolved that council authorize the purchase of new Cub Cadet XT2 LX42 and Cub Cadet XT2 LX46 riding mowers and a new Honda push mower at a cost not to exceed $6,246.24.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Gendron. Discussion. I trust everybody had an opportunity to read the background information on this. Sounds like the Kubota that we're currently using, we're not using very much because it was not the kind of mower that we needed. So they're wanting to trade that in for these 3 pieces of machinery.
Are we down a mower, or is this just an extra mower, or riding mower, grass cutter? What do you wanna call it?
I believe that there is some, this is in need of repair, this GF, so this Kubota, my understanding, and clearly from my report, I've indicated machinery is not my strong point. So I'm led to believe that this Kubota isn't necessarily just a lawnmower, it's a piece of machinery that can have other attachments but we're only utilizing it for the mower piece. And it doesn't work well when we're looking at the various slopes through that. And so it does need some work. So they are stating that the riding mower needs $800 in parts and $1,600 in labor, a quote of $2,400. And that it has to be specific with a Kubota dealer. It's not as generic as some of the other pieces of equipment. And so that's why this entity who deals with a Kubota is willing to take that as a trade-in because they do work with that line of equipment. And so for the trade-in of $4,000, they're providing 2 riding mowers, a 42-inch deck and a 46-inch deck, as well as a new push mower, with the trade-in value at the end result being $6,200. So you get more mowers with the trade-in.
That they can actually use. When I met with Joe a couple of months ago to go over all the machinery, he certainly was saying that that they needed some new mowers. Oh, Councillor Jarvis.
And this gives us an opportunity to have 3 people working at the same time, as
And
opposed to just one.
the ability to get more on top of the grass
Yeah, we
cutting.
can get 3 times as much work done.
For sure. Further discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Manitoba Accessibility Fund grant response, we did put this as an addition, as this was identified as an item that Parks wanted to discuss, as well as those heritage signs. So the reason that the signs have not been put up in place is because of this project. So there's numerous signs that we're looking at throughout the town, dealing with our heritage and working in conjunction with our heritage organization, that we put the grant application in for, I believe, back in February, and so we've been successful. So this is really
Wow.
exciting.
Fabulous.
I believe that they're covering, like when we looked at the entire scope of the project, there's minimal expense to the community for this project as a result of this funding opportunity. So that's great news.
Wonderful, that's very good, and it's gonna be good to see those heritage posters back on the boardwalk, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So rec department, minor hockey t-shirt sponsorship, be it hereby resolved that council authorizes the recreation manager to print 20 t-shirts as sponsorship to the Winnipeg Beach minor soccer program.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis, seconder, please. Councillor Wu. Discussion.
So there was an online through auction, and it was within the spending limits throughout, that the rec department had secured, and I do have a sample here so councils can see the type of it's a very good quality shirt, in reference to the whatever it is, dealing with sport and and things through there. So they got well over 100 t-shirts like that of good quality. And so as the report indicated, we did talk about the need to identify as well, like when we're running events, identifying staff, having some consistency through there. So I have authorized looking at the safety concern and running the new events to pinpoint volunteers of getting the emblem with staff, as well as for volunteer in block letters in the back. So the method is consistent. There is some t-shirts that are small in nature and more along the youth size. And so the rec manager had stated, looking at the soccer program, and as her report is indicating, it's a bit of a mismatch, and it would be a way as these t-shirts for the cost of just printing numbers and our emblem on there. It's not as if like they're reused year after year. It would be a great way to just utilize t-shirts that have already been purchased for an organization. And that's what the resolution is for council.
Questions, comments? Councilor
Maybe I
Kuzlowski?
missed it, how much were the shirts?
So in her, the shirts in total, that wasn't put forward, so in total, like 100 shirts were, that was an approved expenditure back in the day. I think it was less than, just over $300 for 100 shirts, so they were like $3 a piece. So it's the printing of them that we're looking at for this initiative, 20 shirts at $15 per shirt. All taxes are included.
That's my size.
Further conversation, further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay.
Okay, so before I read the resolution for committee reports, there is something that does require review of council, and that's the refund policy. So we have had a few refunds in the past, and it's been identified that administration and recreation were to create a refund policy. So looking at the various forms, the rec manager has put forward some recommendations as to what she is providing for council as for various programs, because it's just just a set standard is very difficult, because so many things are so different, and the community gardens being one of them, right? So taking a good look at this, what does this look like for council? If council is good with the allocations between the swimming, the markets, the hockey, the can skate, all the various items, and is in support of the process for refunds that the rec manager has identified, we will then move forward and create an official policy for council approval. But if there is any changes, it would be great to know that.
Discussion? Councilor Gendron?
Chris has been through a full year. She's experienced cancellations and sort of how things go, and so I don't think as a council I'm in a position to dispute or argue with her recommendations. She's basing it on her experience, so I would just go with what her recommendations are. I do know that there is no clear policy, because I've asked when signing a couple of checks, so yeah, it's good that we'll be getting one in.
The question I noticed with kids rec hockey and can skate and power skating, there's a full refund up until the start date. Would that affect her programming or her decision to go forward if 3 or 4 people pulled out of the can skate or rec hockey the day before it was supposed to start?
I did have concerns recognizing that. She feels that, you know, it's more of an anomaly. It's usually either relocation or things out of control that people are pulling out of those, and so it's not that there's going to be mass registration just to pull out. And so she did note that put the policy in place, monitor that policy. If that needs to be changed as it's proving ineffective, we can then revise the policy at a later date.
Okay. Further discussion, Councilor Jarvis?
I concur with Councillor Chandra, let Carissa do her job.
Be it resolved that council accept the committee reports as presented.
I do not have that. Is that not under
It
this?
should be after that one.
Okay, I've got this one here.
Oh, you know what,
Committee reports?
yeah.
Yep.
I just put it in.
That's okay. Can I get a mover, please?
Oh, I didn't do that one, I missed that.
That's why I was asking, do you need that under the committee?
We'll do that again. No, that's not.
We'll do it again?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can go forward with
Yeah.
this one? Okay.
Sorry.
Mover, Councillor Jarvis, you had your hand up, yes?
I was gonna say, no, I didn't.
Thank you, Councillor Kozlowski. All in favor? Carried.
Backpedaling to additions.
Here we go.
Be it hereby resolved that council authorize the seasonal hires and start dates as outlined in the CAO report. How did I miss that?
It's okay.
I didn't print my report.
Jesus. My mouse has died. Can I get the mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Gendron. I trust everybody has had an opportunity to review this. Questions, comments, points of discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Okay, so council committee and board reports. At last meeting, we would go through actually the roundtable discussion that you see listed through there. We'll read the resolution, mover second, any comments, and that's when the roundtable would happen. And that's for all those verbal reports on various committees or that council sits on that would like to discuss. As mayor, you did recently meet with the business owners. You may want to apprise
Yes.
council on that. So that's where that when we look at roundtable discussion, it's not a formal agenda piece, but it is just if there is anything to note on any of the committees that any council sits on and would like just to have open dialogue with council. So be it hereby resolved that council approves the council committee and board reports as presented.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. What a surprise. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Gendron. So, discussion. Councillor Gendron.
There was the invite earlier on the agenda by Gimli to attend a meeting they were having with regard to
Sure.
yeah, sure, thank you all for jogging my memory. Short-term rentals, I did share with the CAO that it came up in discussion at our last EIPD meeting that Arborg, was it Arborg? Arborg actually has a bylaw with regard to short-term rentals being required to have a business license. So I know that we had just talked briefly about it in the past and thought moving forward we would maybe at some point take a look at that, see if there was anything we wanted to do. So there is that bylaw available for reference at any point in time that we are maybe discussing this further.
Any other meetings and committees? Councillor Jarvis.
I think, because you and I had spoken about the zoning would all have to be changed, so would the bylaw still be applicable for licensing for that, or?
So I believe the business license that Councillor Gendron's referring to is just our internal, it's not
Yeah, I
part
understand.
of the zoning piece, right? So there's lots of different avenues. This is a hot topic in several municipalities as to what they're looking at doing. Winnipeg is taking a very hard stance of no property owner can own more than 3 properties for the the use of short-term rentals. I do still question some of the legislation and the authorities for them to do so, as it may be challenged via the Human Rights Act with prohibiting a right to prosper. So there's, I think there's a lot of trial and error when it comes to that. So there's lots of various avenues to come through with short-term rentals, and that's where, if this is a priority of council of looking at designating some time to have that conversation, I'm not gonna draft something without knowing where you're looking at going. Yeah, because there's lots of options.
Councillor General.
Yeah, and I was just bringing that up as a committee report, that was something that transpired at that meeting, and it was shared with, wasn't just shared with us, it was shared of everybody at the table.
Other meetings anybody here has attended, or committee meetings people have attended that you'd like to report back to council on?
I did Selkirk Weed Control, but it was the same as the last meeting, and, it's the same deal about loose strife.
Okay.
They're trying to get it off, and I had mentioned that before, so the whole thing is, because there's some problems with this now, and so now they've rewritten it and readdressed the loose strife, the Noxious Weed Act, and they're including the watershed districts now, because they had excluded them originally, but loose strife has been around for 130 years. And it was, we had a massive, and everybody will remember, we had a massive campaign against this in the early 90s. There is no known correction for loose strife, and it will eventually take over all of the culverts, okay, and all of our drainage ditches, and the fact that they took it off is bewildering. However, they're now soliciting support from the watershed districts to try and get this loose strife back onto noxious weed, and in fairness, it consumed a good part of the meeting, so that's, I just keeping you apprised of that.
Okay. And is there any update on the, on your safety committee?
I haven't
Because
made, no,
with the
because
COPP.
we actually talked about the report, the Great West Life report, and there was, all the deficiencies through the insurance thing, and Joe was there, I think Josh was there, but we have a meeting on July the 2nd, so really it was, because everybody was a new player now, Jody's in charge of it, and that's really the only other thing, and everybody else was at the COPP meeting, so that's the only thing I say.
No, I'm wondering about COPP, whether there's been any follow-up as a result.
No, I
anything?
spoke with Councillor Gendron last Thursday, I think, and I suggested I would, and we talked about whether I should solicit the citizens' involvement. So I didn't at first, and then I took it upon myself on the weekend to just kind of put my foot in that puddle. And I did, and there's no new movement on this. So I'm gonna give this about another week or so, and then I'm going to contact COPP again to find out what's going on.
So are you thinking that if other
They're saying
people...
that and I read in Carissa's report too, that there's always been, and there has been for years, a problem with volunteers. So we need commitment from people and that was always been the Citizens on Patrol program's problem, is getting people out there. And then the other dilemma that was kind of discussed was the fact, like I have a certain walking area that I'm familiar with. So example, if I see something out of place, it registers me, but if I get further down, if I get past 4th on Prospect, I'm not there enough times to recognize that something's different here, because I almost am never there, right? So, and the same thing with the other side. So it's one thing to get people to volunteer, but it's another thing to get somebody that's gonna volunteer in their own area, you know what I mean? Like your travel path is your travel path, and you're familiar and comfortable with that. So we're trying to solicit people now, get people involved that are willing to walk in their own neighborhood.
Well, the COPP meeting, there was a number of people there who did sign up to
Right,
volunteer. I'm just wondering if...
We had 8, I believe it was 8 confirmed, it moved to 10, and then I made sure that there were some other people, I including my own name and a few other names, and so we got it to 14, but we ideally, because we have a lot of ground to cover, and like I'm saying, you need some sort of familiarity, like you don't want somebody from the other side of the Highway 9 patrolling downtown, because they might not even know whose building is who. Like I discovered a problem because I happen to know the property owner. So we were trying to get people in their own area, so, but we're up to, we think, about 14, and
Because everybody always says, oh yeah, me, and then when you make that phone call, it's like they don't answer the phone. I'm going to their house.
Okay. Okay,
Anyways, that's the update. We're trying, give it another week and we'll see what happens.
okay, thank you, Councilor Jarvis. Councilor Kozlowski?
Yeah, I attended the Gimli Senior Resource Center yesterday morning. It was an hour meeting. I have some brochures here for the seniors programs, et cetera, so we can maybe put these up on the bulletin board. Their statement, we had a general meeting yesterday. Their income for the year, and they had a great year, was $318,000. Their expenses were the same, $318,000. They served 3,192 meals over the year,
Wow.
with 241 volunteer hours. Winnipeg Beach this year is in its 25th year of operation.
That's pretty cool.
And they've done over 270 meals with 67 volunteer hours.
Wow.
So they're doing great there. Meals on Wheels also, Donator and Winnipeg Beach, total of 1,014 meals with 228 volunteer hours. So that's my report, and we're breaking now for the summer. We'll continue on in the fall and September, and they've looks like they've had a great year.
Wonderful, good to hear. I met with the restaurants in downtown Winnipeg Beach to better our communication with each other and talk to them about hours of operation, and also see how the town and the restaurants could work more closely together. I've got to say that the restaurants owners who showed up were very appreciative of being able to have open dialogue with town and be able to talk about joint issues and concerns. And so some of the things that they talked about was actually very interesting. So issues that they brought up was parking.
That's surprising.
Right? You see his reaction.
Was cats the second thing they brought up?
No. Cats was not, but parking certainly was. And it was very interesting to hear from people. You know, like there was one restaurant owner who said that, you know, someone would pull up in front of his establishment, you know, Friday afternoon and not leave until Sunday evening. And that really trounced his walk-up traffic and those kinds of things. So we're talking about whether we should have some assigned parking on the streets for different restaurants. Like the Dairy Bee, like the Breakwater. I was gonna say the Boardwalk, but that's not you. Anyway, so we're having some conversations about that and having some conversations about that with our CAO to get more information before I bring it to council formally. When talking about their hours, and I didn't do anything but ask them about their hours of operation and how that's working for them, and wanting to make sure that we had places that were open. And I heard from every single restaurant owner saying, we would be open more if there were people downtown. They say it closes up, and I say, well, you know, I read on Facebook every so often people complaining that there's no place to get food. But even, you know, owners at Johnny said, like, they were open until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, every night of the week. You know, when bingo let out, because the bingo used to be played at the, what was it called, Doug, where bingo was played?
At the rec center?
No, it was down here on the Playland.
But Locker here.
And they used to have the Lingo Bingo or something. And Boardwalk Johnny said that they would stay open until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning all the time, and they would continue to do so if there were people downtown. So, well, what about Sunday nights? Everybody seems to close up early Sunday nights, and he said, and every single restaurant owner said, yeah, and walk downtown Winnipeg Beach at 6 o'clock on a Sunday night, and there is no one here, and so we can't be paying 2 or 3 staff to be sitting there at $15 an hour with our doors open with nobody coming for food. So one of the suggestions they said is if you'd like us to have longer hours, we'd certainly be open to it, because this is the only time of the year You know, they stay open during the winter as a courtesy to us, so that people who live here would have some place to eat, but they certainly aren't making money here at that time. They make their money in the summer, and they say, you know, we'll stay later if we have more things happening. So they were suggesting, like, why can't we have movie nights, you know, every Sunday night on the beach? Then we'll stay open Sunday nights, because that brings people down. We'll change our menu up a bit. We'll do, you know, hot dogs, hamburgers, popcorn, whatever. We'll do that. One of the restaurant owners said, well, can we use the volleyball court there? We'll bring in volleyball tournaments so that people are there at different hours. Somebody else said, well, how about Trivia Pursuit nights on Friday nights at the bandstand? Pub Trivia Pursuit, and he said, and I will provide all the prizes for everybody, so that they're wanting to work cooperatively with us. They're wanting to take some responsibility for some of these things. But, you know, it's about getting more creative, and I certainly let them know, you know, we don't have more and more rec staff to be doing all of this stuff. And so they said, yeah, they certainly understand that we can't be going to more expense and hiring more people to do this if there wasn't revenue. But then somebody suggested, one of the restaurant owners said, yeah, you guys should be making more revenue with all of the recreation stuff you're doing here. He said, why don't you build some nice looking bleachers that you can move on either side of the bandstand? People hate carting their chairs down here. Charge $10 a seat. Why don't you get a bunch of Winnipeg Beach collapsible chairs with the name Town of Winnipeg Beach on them, set them up for prime seating at the boardwalk, and charge for prime seating, and people would be happy to pay, you know, $5-10 a seat, you know, make some revenue that might support, you know, more staff, whatever. Whether we do it or don't do it, whether it's something that we can do or can't do, the fact that the restaurants are really wanting to work with this council to come up with unique and different ideas. It was a couple of hours of a meeting where just some interesting issues were coming up. They really highlighted the issue in terms of the washrooms not being open late enough into the evening and late enough into the year, and really asked very clearly whether this was something council could look at ASAP. That is making it really, really hard when you do have lots of people down here and the washrooms are closing at 8 o'clock at night, and you got, you know, a couple hundred people here. Then they've got people banging on their doors just wanting to use the washroom all the time, and then things get bad. They also brought up RCMP coverage, and I told them that, you know, the struggles the RCMP is going through, and, you know, not having enough staff and having to go through a wider area, but they're saying that it's getting kind of hard for some folks walking by the hotel outdoor patio later into the evening, in terms of some not okay things being said and being yelled at people who were walking down the street, and some pretty horrific things being said. So apparently there's some people who are avoiding the downtown when it gets past 6 or 7 o'clock at night because of some stuff that's happening on the patio. They also said that there was a huge brawl at the hotel a few weeks ago. People got hurt, people were beaten up, and the RCMP were called, and the RCMP just said, yeah, we're too busy tonight, we can't make it. And I think they came back 2 or 3 hours. They came 2 or 3 hours later. So there's not a lot that, you know, we can resolve about that right now. Chat in a minute about that. But that was some of their concerns: the washrooms, the parking, and the RCMP. So it was kind of interesting to see that they have the same concerns we have, and would like to be working closely with the town in terms of how to resolve some of these issues. They had some really interesting ideas about the parking, and also really appreciated the dilemma that the town council was in terms of parking and handicap parking and ticketing and having enough parking space. So it was a very, very good meeting. They suggested that they would like to meet again at the end of season to see how the end of the season goes, or how the season goes, and we can just sort of do a review at the end of August, beginning of September. And so I'm feeling pretty positive about the whole thing, and what I'm feeling most positive about is that, the increase in communication between businesses and between, council. The second thing I wanna report is I, was at the Sadie Grimm, dedication ceremony on Sunday, and, as was, Derek Johnson, our MLA, and Andrew Smith, who is the Minister of Municipal Relations. Correct. Which was very cool, and Andrew Smith made an announcement that he was, giving them a grant funding of $50,000 to finish the, picnic area, the picnic bench area that had started a couple of years ago. And so I believe the construction's gonna be starting this year, which is kind of exciting. And certainly the Coalition of Manitoba Motorcycles were very, very happy about that. And I think that's all I have to report right now. Questions, comments, Councilor?
Just a question. Did, that fight take place on the patio, do you know?
No, I believe it was I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
If I answer, I would be.
And then the other thing is, within the rules of our patio licensing, if public harassment is happening, are they entitled to maintain their patio license? Somebody, the CEO could take a look at that.
Councilor Jarvis?
I think the fight took place on the inside. There was
Okay.
nothing on the outside that I noticed, witnessed, heard. That's been ongoing, and when I say this, I mean, just for discussion, I knew that, and when we were at the AMM in April, I talked about it, I said they used to have security. The Manitoba Liquor Commission made the hotel, when Reed Kellner owned it, have security and bouncers on site.
That's right.
And I talked about the patio as well, that this was a problem. And and I've phoned the police myself, I've had copious discussions with the hotel itself. I phoned the police and the police, the answer, and even when we met, I remember we met in November when we had with the RCMP, and I talked to them about that.
Yep.
I said, we place phone calls, and they say, well, is anybody hurt? Is there a weapon, or is anybody, if a crime hasn't been committed, they won't come out. So we have to push, as indicated by Councillor Gendron, we start to say, look, here's some parameters that you have to work with, because we have situations, and I've mentioned it before, and I think I even mentioned when there was a husband and a wife and a baby, a stroller, got into a discussion, I think I talked about that here in council chamber, got into what could have been a problem, and the wife dragged the husband out of it, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So, it's at a point now where we're approaching the crescendo, and we really need to put our heads together on this.
And I'm wondering if there is something with our patio licensing that we can deal with it that way. I would love to see more RCMP coverage in this area. I really would, and I think lots of people would agree to that. The only problem is that the RCMP is under the same stress we are. A, they have a lack of staff. B, centralization. So a lot of their offices have been shut down. They're all working out of Gimli, and they're covering from Stonewall up to Matheson Island.
Oh, I know.
And so if the officers on patrol are over in Arborg and we call them about a fight that's happening here, they're not gonna get here for a couple of hours, they're just not. And so we have to start coming up with some of our own ideas in terms of policing. And maybe at some point in the future, we can look at summer patrol or summer police, or, I don't know, I know that's very expensive as well, but in the meantime, if we could do something with our patio licenses to make it such that you have to have proper decorum and or your own security, or you just won't have your patio license. I don't know, that sounds a little harsh, but.
Well, they did it at the Viking. They took it away for 4 years. The patio, the ability to have a patio license, especially during Icelandic Festival. But they also had the situation, everybody remembers downtown Winnipeg, and it was, I forget the name of the place now, but the liquor commission went in there and said, look, you either control, remember there was gun battles there, that you either control the situation or we'll revoke your license. So we can communicate with the liquor commission on this, and they can help us make suggestions.
We might be able to start by talking to the hotel first, and then taking it from there. but yeah, some good suggestions. Councillor Kozlowski?
Yeah, were you the only one at this meeting?
Yep.
Yeah, don't you think you should have maybe taken someone else with you? Like,
Well, I
two,
had
three
a-
heads are better than one, you know,
Well-
for different ideas, different.
Absolutely, so let me tell you that, all of us are on different committees,
Right.
and so I was, is there a problem over there?
Yep.
Guys?
Yeah, with my computer, my
Okay.
computer just went stupid.
That's okay, computers do that.
And he's
sometimes.
way smarter at it than I am, so,
Absolutely,
and his suggestion was to close it down, so I just did.
that's a good idea. We're all on committees,
Yeah.
and so myself and Councillor Hool are on the rec committee, so it was our responsibility on the rec committee. And, we had decided that we were gonna meet with the businesses in this regard. And so, I put a call up to Councillor Hool in terms of, possible dates to meet, and not hearing back, but needing to meet with the businesses, I went forward with the meeting. In the same way that I'll be meeting with the Legion, I believe it's next week on Monday.
Would that not fall under economics too, where I'm chairman and Councillor Gendron is, in charge, or the committee, on the committee? The businesses?
With the businesses? I guess it could be, although I'm not seeing economic development as talking to the restaurants, I sort of see that as a bigger picture.
No, I just don't see what rec center has to do with that. And number two, the signs for the parking, for restaurants. I think it probably, if somebody parks there, they're gonna probably be parked there for a while and go across to the beach, get their food, leave their car there and go across to the beach. Now you're gonna have to ask, again, a bylaw officer in town or whatever, take it them, so I don't think that would be too feasible.
Well, I think that there's a number of things that we can be looking at, but yeah, I mean, I'm just letting people know some of the suggestions that,
And especially if they have a patio out there, then the curbs are there, there's no parking there, right?
right, and so we were looking at the restaurants where it's more of a drive up, Dairy Bee, for example. You know, stopping, getting ice cream, going for a walk, coming back, needing breakwater, you know, dropping off, getting a coffee, you know, that
And
kind of
I've
stuff.
had a lot of people come up to and say, that's a good idea, just have the curbs on where the patios are, because that's a lot more parking that is open up to the public when they come downtown.
But part of the public who are coming downtown are the public who are wanting to come to pick up an ice cream or a coffee so that they can
Yeah.
have more access, eh? Yeah. Councillor General.
Yeah, so just maybe to have a bit better understanding, while we're all on committees, if we are interested in attending a committee meeting, we can. You mentioned at your last report on behalf of the rec committee that this meeting was going to be happening, and I think we all had an opportunity, if we were interested in attending, to speak up at the time and make sure that we were advised of when the meeting was happening. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so sure, if I'd spoken up, I would have been invited as well as Councillor Cole.
Absolutely, for sure. Any other comments? Okay. Any other updates on any other committees? Okay, all in favor? Carried.
Be it hereby resolved that the correspondence be accepted as circulated.
Can I get a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Kozlowski. Sorry, I'm getting tired. All in favor? Carried. Sorry, my brain is shutting down. Yeah. Do I go on camera now?
Be it hereby resolved that council moves in camera at 8:37 PM to discuss matters that are in the preliminary stages and personnel matters. And be it further resolved that any matters discussed while in camera be held confidential until such time as discussed in open council.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Cool, Councillor Jarvis, you confused me there. Can I get a seconder, please? Anybody, seconder, please? Councillor Kozlowski. All in favor?
on the mic. Okay, you should be good.
Be it hereby resolved that council moves out of camera at 9:49 PM and resumes the regular meeting of council.
Can I get a mover, please, Councillor Jarvis? Thank you. Can I get a seconder, please, Councillor Taylor? All in favor? Okay.
Be it hereby resolved that council adjourns the June 14th, 2023 regular meeting at 9:50 PM.
You got a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Seconder, please, Councillor General. All in favor?